Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's Workflow Masterclass. Just going to hold on for 2 or 3 more minutes just whilst everybody else logs into the session. I can see the numbers coming up now, which is great. Just do me a quick favor, actually. I'm hoping you can settle a debate that we've been having in the Pixie team this morning. If you can just go to the chat box and let me know, are you the type of person that prefers to have a Monday off or a Friday off? So if you just find the chat box, it should be located at the bottom of the Zoom taskbar somewhere. Just let me know, are you more of a Monday off person or a Friday off person? And hopefully you can settle off a debate that we've been having. Wow, okay, an overwhelming response for Friday here. Deepinder says, no, Chris says both. Yep, Chris, I'm with you there. Paula, Monday, Kate, Friday, Max, Monday. Okay, a mixed bag. Looks like there's quite a few Fridays though so far. I have to agree, guys. Fridays off just feels so much better. Longer weekend. I'm quite happy to come in and get started on a Monday morning. I feel like Monday's off, the Tuesday just becomes the next Monday, and it's kind of the same old stuff. So, yeah, thank you for letting me know that. Great. I'm going to get started. I know there's a few more people to join. I can see people coming in, which is great. So this morning's session is all about workflows, and we're going to be looking at how you can map out and build your own efficient and automated workflows. Some of this is going to be a little bit theoretical in the fact that we're going to kind of discuss the process behind mapping workflows, some different ways that you can do it. But then also part of the webinar is going to be quite hands-on, going into Pixie specifically and showing you how you can build workflows and things that you can do in there. I can see a few Pixie customers on here, which is awesome. For you guys, some of this might be stuff you already know, and hopefully you might pick up a few tips and tricks along the way as we go through as well. So if we haven't met before, hi, my name is Jordan. I'm the co-founder and head of marketing here at Pixie. If you haven't already connected with me on LinkedIn, you can find me there. Please feel free to send me a connection request. It'd be good to chat with you there. And if you do have any questions for me after this webinar, my email address is on the screen, so feel free to send me an email. I'll be sending you a copy of the recording afterwards, along with a few links for different things. But if you can think of any questions that I don't get to answer whilst we're on here today, feel free to email me using that email address there. Couple of housekeeping rules before we get started. Nothing that you haven't heard before, I'm sure. Close down your emails, silence your phone, lock your doors, focus, pay attention. We've blocked out some time to be here this morning. Let's make the most of it and try to learn something new. If you do have any questions throughout the session, the best place for those is the Q&A box, not the chat box. So sometimes I might ask you to use the chat box. Other times I might say, if you've got a question, use the Q&A box. That way it just helps me to keep track of anything that's been asked. One of the things I will say, if you're not already a Pixie customer, please feel free to go start a 30-day free trial of Pixie. Just because a little bit later on when we do the actual workflow demonstration in Pixie, it would be really helpful if you had a workspace that you can click along whilst we're going through and actually start to do some of the things that I show you. So just head to the website there. It's a 30-day free trial. You don't need to put any credit card details in like that. And you can cancel anytime if you don't want to use it afterwards. But it'd be really helpful if you can have that available for a little bit later on. Should only take 2 minutes to get set up. Cool. Okay. Still plenty of people coming in, which is good to see. So the agenda for this morning is really straightforward. First of all, it's going to kick things off with a little bit of theory and look at, why we need workflows and actually where we can actually start when it comes to mapping out and building our workflows. And the reality is that a lot of you have already started this. And if you think you haven't started it, then you actually have, and I'll tell you why. Then we're going to look at practice, and we're going to look at 4 different ways you can map out and build your workflow. So it'll be a bit more hands-on here. I'm going to show you some different ways that you can start to build out your workflow processes outside of Pixie, using some different tools and ideas. And then the last section is going to be the masterclass part, which is where we look at how you actually build workflows in Pixies, what they consist of, what the different elements are, how you can try to make them a bit more all singing, all dancing, and some of the cool things that you can do in there as well. Cool. Okay, kicking things off then, why workflows and where to start? So what you can see here on the screen is a 3-legged stool, and I've also got the letters PPT, and you might have come across this concept before if you read any kind of business books or you read different business blogs. There's this concept of people, process, and technology. And what this concept says is that in order for things to happen in a business or in your accounting firm, for action to actually take place, there needs to be the right balance of people, process, and technology. But the reality is that, as you start out in business and the business starts to grow, the three things can kind of get out of balance, because when you get busy, what do? You bring more people on board. You say, oh, I'm really, really busy. I need to bring more people into the team. And then you might start looking at using bits of technology. So you might see a shiny app here or a shiny app there, and you start to implement those bits of technology. And this can kind of happen as you grow initially. And what happens is that the people aspect might be quite good, and you might have lots of great technology that you're using. But often I find in the conversations that I've had with different practice owners that the process element is still kind of lagging a little bit behind. And what that means is that your kind of three-legged stool, the three things that really drive action in your business, is slightly out of balance because the leg for the processes is slightly shorter than the rest. So really how this all fits together is that the people in your business, they will perform work, but they need to perform work using processes. And then the technology that you use is used to streamline and improve these processes. So for example, we'll look at Pixie later, and we'll look at how that as a piece of technology can streamline the workflows with all the automated emails and everything else. But really that's only as good as the processes that are there. So without that process piece really nailed in the middle, it's kind of difficult, because you've got a team of people here, you've got an app that can do lots of things over here, and this missing piece in the middle, which is the processes and the workflows, is something that needs to be developed. So hopefully, as we go through this session today, we're going to look at really how we can strengthen that process element and build out those workflows in your business much, much better. So why do we need workflows? In fact, before we do that, just do me a quick favor. Go to the chat box, please, and just let me know, in your accounting firm right now, out of those three legs, which of the ones feels most out of balance? Is it people? Is it process? Is it technology? I've got a hunch that it might be processes. This is just from the conversations that I've had, but it'd be good if you guys can let me know as well. Yeah, lots of processes and tech. Yeah. I think it's natural for it to be the case, and I've seen it in businesses that I've been involved in myself as well, that as the business grows, the thing that you want to do is just throw more people at the busyness and the problems, and often that works for the time being, but you get to a point where you really do need those processes in place. Awesome, thank you for letting me know that, guys. So why workflows? What are the benefits here? So the first is obviously, looking at that PPT framework, it helps you to increase action, it increases the amount of things that can get done, and it does that by improving efficiency. Now, one of the other things that's really, really great about workflows that I think sometimes gets overlooked is that actually it makes delegation a lot easier. You guys are all really busy practice owners, you're building your businesses, you want to bring team members on board that you can delegate work to. Without having processes in place that they can follow, it makes delegation so difficult, because essentially you have to describe what they need to do each time, or you need to sit over their shoulder and say, this is how to do it. Or you need to go and, create an ad hoc process to send to them and say, do it like this. So by having these workflows and processes in place, it actually makes delegation to your team members a lot simpler. But it also makes training new team members much simpler as well, because if you're bringing new team members on board as part of your growth plans, then part of their onboarding, part of their training into the way that you do things in your firm, because it's going to be very different, well, not very different, but different to how they might have done it in a different firm, is that you have these workflows in place. So it's really easy for them to pick these workflows up, these processes, and start to follow those, which makes training them much easier as well. And then the last thing that I've got down here is an improvement in consistency. And that's improvement in both the consistency of work, so the output that people are going to be doing, but also the consistency of the client's experience. And for me, that's the more interesting piece here, because I think generally the work can be quite consistent. But the client experiencing is the thing that really, really excites me, because when you get the workflows really nailed and you've got that process and everybody's following it to a T, or you kind of mostly know that each of your clients are going to be receiving that same level of experience, no matter who in the team is dealing with them and no matter what job that they're doing for them. So those are just a few of the key benefits that really nailing the workflows and the processes can have in your firm. So whereabouts should you start? I mentioned earlier that starting isn't actually that difficult. A number of you might think, oh, I'm not really sure where to start with this stuff. But the reality is that you've all already started. You are in business, you have an accounting practice, you have clients, you deliver a service for them. That means that you have workflows, you already have them. They might not be documented, they might not be in a system, but you have the workflows in place. So it's just a case of figuring out what they currently are. You already have these. So a little bit later on, I'm going to show you some ways that you can start to capture these workflows and build them out and visualize what they can look like and how you can improve them. A really good place to start is with templates. And obviously I'm saying this from a slightly biased perspective because we have a number of templates in a template library at Pixie. If you just head to that link right there, use pixie.com/workflow templates. We're trying to build a library of these workflow templates because we realize that often, even though you've got these ideas in your head, finding the time to sit down and really map them out and build them out can often, you don't have the time for it because it's not a huge priority for you, although it should be. So having templates that you can start with as a jumping off point is really helpful because they might be 50% of what you need. But if you can use that right now, then that starts to save you a bit of time, and then you can build it up to 75% of what you need, and then you can build it up to 100% of what you need. So if you're listening to this and you haven't got any workflows, you're not really sure where to start, and you've kind of got them in your head, but you're not really sure that they're the best, or you want to get some inspiration from anywhere else, then feel free to check out that link there. We've got a number of templates, and I'll be showing you how to use those a little bit later on. Another thing to remember here with workflows is that version 1 is ultimately better than version none. I know James Ashford mentioned that saying in the Systems and Workflow Bootcamp, which was last week or the week before. Time is flying so fast, I really can't keep up. And I think this is so key with processes. Don't get hung up on creating the all singing, all dancing workflow on day one. Just focus on getting a workflow process in place. Having something that's documented that you can then start building on and iterating and improving week on week is much better than trying to figure out this perfect workflow right now, because the reality is that you might not have the time for it. You might not even really know what you need to put into it, but over time you will. So just aim to have that kind of initial workflow built, and then you can start building it out afterwards. And then the last point here is about going all in. And that's not about going all in on one template. It's about going all in on workflows full stop. I think oftentimes I speak to people when they're joining Pixie and they're worried that they have to build out the workflows for every single service in their practice right now. The reality is that you don't need to do that. In the long run, it's the perfect position to be in, because then you have that balance of people, process, and technology. But right now, all you need to do is focus on one, get one right, then move on to the next. So for example, you might say that bookkeeping is the biggest time constraint in terms of work within our practice. So we're really going to nail our bookkeeping workflow. Once we've nailed the bookkeeping workflow, then we're going to move on and we're going to nail our personal tax workflow. Once we've got that perfect, then we're going to move on. Then we're going to do our payroll workflow or our onboarding workflow. So it's a case of just picking one, working with it, and then moving on to the next. You don't need to do all 10 or 20 workflows right now at once. Cool. Okay, so before we move on, just let me know in the chat box again, in terms of where you're currently at with workflows. Do you have them documented? Do they all live in your head? Do you have them built out in an application like Pixie? Try to just give me a gauge on where you're currently at in terms of your actual processes. I know a number of you mentioned that processes is something you need to work on, but let me know on kind of a scale whereabouts you are in terms of the actual processes so far. So Marilee's in my head, Pradeep all in my head, Caroline in my head, Christy in my head, Mary, Miro board, Eleanor trying to build through Pixie, keep questioning. Zoe says a mixture. Max mostly in my head with basic workflow setup. Natalie tend to write it down as personal notes. Yeah, cool. So it seems like there's a real mix here. That's great. So by the sounds of it, you're all going to hopefully benefit from actually being able to build out some workflows properly. Whether it's in Pixie or another application, it's completely up to you. Great. So moving on to like the practical element then, 4 ways to actually map out and build your workflows. The first way that I want to show you in terms of mapping out or building workflows is flowcharts. And I just want to caveat that this is by no means a requirement. You can build workflows in Pixie or any other practice management application without going through this flowchart process. You can use the templates and you can iterate it from there. I'm not saying that this is a requirement. I'm just saying that if you want to go down the route of mapping out your processes, then this is something to look at, because the benefits of using flowcharts is that you can map out all of the steps on a very high level. Often when you're inside an application, and this is even the same with Pixie, it's quite difficult to look at the bigger picture of what the workflow is and what it's trying to achieve. Whereas if you map something out on a flowchart, it really allows you to see that bigger picture of the entire process. What you can also do when you do flowchart mapping is that you can get your entire team involved. You can set up a Zoom conversation, or if you're all in the office, you can work together by mapping this out as a team, because oftentimes members of your team are going to think of things in the workflow that you might not think of, because you're not that involved in the process for a particular service. So getting the team involved here can be really helpful. And there's a few tools that you can use. I know somebody in the chat earlier, I think it was Mary, mentioned Miro. There's also two other tools I would recommend called Whimsical and Lucidchart. And I'm just going to share my screen with you quickly here. Hopefully you can all see Whimsical on my screen. Just let me know in the chat box if that's worked okay and you can still see what I'm looking at. Yeah, cool. I've recently got a Mac laptop, and it's the first time I'm ever using a Mac laptop. I've been using Windows for years, so I'm still trying to figure out how things work and messing things up as I go. So please bear with me. So Whimsical is one of the tools that I would recommend for mapping out processes. We use it internally at Pixie to map out different sequences and processes that are internal to our business. And I just want to give you an example of what that could look like. So here's one that I knocked out really, really quickly earlier on. Just to give you an example of how you might start to map out an onboarding process. So I've got some steps coming along here at the top, and then feeding off each of the steps, I've got different things that might happen. So for example, I send a proposal to a prospect, they decline it. What happens next? I place them into a long-term nurture sequence. So there's no detail here. It's not saying what that nurture sequence of emails looks like, how many emails there are, how we send it to them. It's just completely high level. It's almost like an ideas chart where I can plot out what the different things are. And then I've got this next step here that says, okay, proposal's been accepted. What then happens? So if I'm using something like Practice Ignition or Go Proposal, I'm then saying, cool, the invoices get raised, DAX in Xero or QuickBooks. The direct debit gets set up, whether it's with Stripe or Go Cardless. And then we move through to the next step, which is where the client gets created in the practice management app. What happens off the back of that? Cool, an automatic email goes out, services get scheduled, we trigger the AML sequence. So you're just mapping out the various elements in almost like a flowchart process, and building this is really, really straightforward. If I just go to another example and just open up this empty chart here, with Whimsical, it's really, really simply just the click of a button. You click on this shape here. So you're going to add this step here. So we'll just literally rebuild the onboarding one. So proposal sent to client. What happens next? Proposal gets accepted. Great. What happens off the back of the proposal being accepted? Invoicing happens. What happens off the back of invoicing? Payments. So you're literally just clicking, adding these things on. You don't need to go too much detail right now. You're just doing it to get that high level picture of everything that happens. And you can do this for all of the different workflows and services. So for example, as well as onboarding, you might choose to do it for something like bookkeeping. So for example, if I just edit this, go back here. So what does the bookkeeping workflow look like on a monthly basis? So step number one might be to check Receipt Bank and HubDoc. Step number two might be to reconcile in Xero. There might be a sub-step here, query missing transactions with client. Then you might have another step here that says automated reminder sequence. So I'm not going and adding tons of detail in here. I'm literally just taking ideas as they come into my head and dropping them out onto a page to try and map out what this process can look like as we go along. Then you might have another step here, management accounts. Maybe you prepare the management accounts in something like Fathom. So you might put Fathom here. And you can see just how easy it is to build these out. So go ahead, have a look at Whimsical. This is the tool that we use in Pixie that I would definitely recommend, just because out of the ones I've tried, I find it the most easiest. But like I mentioned on the slides earlier, there are some other tools available like Miro, like Lucidchart, and I'm sure there's plenty of others out there as well that you can take a look at. So just do me a quick favor in the comments. Have you used anything like this before? If you have, let me know what tool. Let me know if it was useful. And if you haven't used it, do you think that this is something that might be useful for you and your team to sit down and go through and map these processes out? Ben says, yes, use Miro at the moment. Yeah, Miro is another great one. Yeah. Look, it is really beneficial. There is a small caveat. And the small caveat that is that once you've mapped it out in here, it's kind of like that's only the first step. Then you actually have to start to build out the detail and actually add it into something like Pixie or any other workflow practice management app where it becomes a live useful workflow. Because as it stands in terms of like a process here, It's great for visualizing, but in terms of actually using it, it's kind of redundant. So good for the initial mapping out process, but then the next step really is to start building it out properly. And one of the ways that you can start to build it out properly is, first of all, to go to a spreadsheet. And spreadsheets are really, really useful. I'm probably going to get killed for saying this by my colleagues in Pixie for recommending spreadsheets for workflow. But actually, one of the benefits of using spreadsheets is that as well as mapping out the high-level steps, you can start to map out some of the kind of detailed elements as well. So the sub-level steps. So for example, I mentioned earlier about on that bookkeeping example, one of the steps was to go into Xero and reconcile the transactions. Maybe there's a few sub-steps involved there. And this is where you can start to add a bit more information. So you can start to add things about who's responsible for this step. What is the estimated time frame for us to complete this part of the workflow? Oops. And if I just go back to my other screen here, I'm really getting the hang of this Mac stuff now, sliding between screens. It's pretty cool. You can see here that I've got an example of a workflow template that I've built out on Excel. And what I've managed to do here is just start to add in that extra detail. So I've got some dates here to let me know in terms of when these should be starting. I've got the steps outlined here, and then I've got the information here. Now, I know that I've got a predominantly UK audience here this morning. So if you're looking at this wondering what the hell is a 1099 NEC MISC, it's a US form, so don't worry about it. But as you can see, using a spreadsheet allows you to add that additional information on here that you otherwise would, you could definitely add it into something like Whimsical, but I think it would become quite overwhelming with that much text and that much information. Whereas on a spreadsheet, you can really start to map it out with a little bit more information. Cool. Moving on to the third idea then, adding even more information to the workflows. And this is where checklists come in really, really handy. I'm an absolute lover of checklists. I try and checklist absolutely everything. I'll give you an example of one of the checklists that I use a little bit later on. But what checklists allow you to do in the workflow process is to turn these tasks into really bite-sized steps, to really drill down into the minute detail. And sometimes you might think that, going into the really specific detail of checklists is overkill, but actually it has a number of benefits. And one of them is that it makes sure that nothing gets missed. Because often, when you're really busy, and even if you're doing something that you've done 100 times before, whilst you're working on that, and then somebody emails you and then somebody phones you, it can become very, very easy to get distracted and lose track of where you're at. So just having a checklist process that you can follow really helps to make sure that nothing gets missed and everything gets done in the right order. And it's really especially useful for training new team members because checklists really, really make things simple. Just having a step there is kind of like, here's what to do. But then when you have the checklist items, it's almost spelling it out for them, spoon feeding them exactly what they need to do. And I think in terms of how checklists fit in with this, you can build these into the other two processes. So you might start out mapping something in Whimsical as a high level process. Then you might add a bit more information into a spreadsheet, and then checklists is where you can really drill down into the minute detail of each individual step. And what I'm going to show you a little bit later on in Pixie is how you can combine all three of these into Pixie and actually have all of that information in one place without having to use different applications and doing things all over the place. So if I just show you an example of a checklist that I use, it's not an accounting one, unfortunately, but it's one that I use when we publish new content on our blog. And it's just about what is the checklist when we publish a new article from an SEO perspective, because when we write content for our blog, we want it to rank on Google for certain keywords. I've published hundreds of blogs over the years, but I still have this checklist to follow because it makes me remember every single time and go through it and say, and be meticulous and say, have I ticked off each of these things one by one? You can see here that some of them, well, for me, are quite obvious. For you, you might be looking at this and it might look like it's in a foreign language, which is fine. But just having that checklist process there really, really helps to focus my attention when I'm working on this task, even though it's something I've done time and time again. But it also means that if I'm off on holiday for a week and I need somebody in the team to do something for me, I can give them this checklist and say, hey, I need you to publish a blog. Here are the steps, go do it. And it's pretty easy for them to follow looking at this. Cool. Just do me a favor, let me know in the chat box, do you currently have any checklists built out in your workflows currently? Or do you not have any checklists at all? No checklists, cool. There's a great book called The Checklist Manifesto, and it was written by a surgeon. I think he was a surgeon, yeah. And And he talks about how in hospitals and in surgery, checklists are used like religiously, like everybody has to use them because, you know, these are some of the smartest people out there, surgeons. They know exactly what they're doing, but even surgeons can mess up sometimes and forget what the next step is. So they checklist absolutely everything. Stefan says, yes, becomes a question of where best to keep them and review. Cool. Hopefully I'm going to show you a little bit later, Stefan, how you can keep these checklists in Pixie actually in the workflow, where it's all tied to the task and tied to everything that everybody's doing. So the very last thing that I want to share with you, a kind of final way for building out workflow processes, is videos. Videos are incredibly useful, especially for giving people that visual overview of what needs to be done. Because if there's a task or a subtask that's got a lot of information in it, and you might be able to capture some of that on a checklist, or you might be able to capture some of it in a spreadsheet workflow. With a video, you can capture absolutely everything. So if you're clicking around in an application and there's different buttons to press and different filters or fields to use, having videos there just really helps to simplify that process for somebody to watch. So it's really useful to use videos in your workflows where things can't be explained as easily. So I think using applications and software is a perfect example here. You know, accountants use tons of apps now within your workflows for different things. And if you have screen share videos showing or reminding you or people in your team how to actually use these applications, what the process needs to look like, how they do it, that's going to simplify the process massively for them. And like I said, again, you know, it's great for training and giving them some supporting documentation. Now, one of the tools that I would recommend, hugely recommend for video, is called Loom. I know that a number of people already use Loom, but I just want to give you a bit of an overview about what Loom looks like from our side. So here at Pixie, we have a team Loom library. You can see these here. We have a number of different folders, and in the folders, we have recordings for onboarding, how to do support, how to do sales, what to do for educating customers. And within each of these folders, we've got a number of videos outlining how to do different things. And this is just internal for us, but you could do exactly the same within your accounting firm. You could have this video library showing all the how-tos to do different steps. And they're really, really easy to record. All you do is you install the Loom plugin in your, oops, there we go. You install the Loom plugin into Google Chrome, might also work with Safari, or you can download it on desktop. You click a button, it starts recording your screen. Once it's done, it saves the video, uploads it to the cloud, generates a link, and then you can use that link in an email to send to a client, to send to your team, or just to keep it within the Loom library where you can reference. And again, one of the things that I'm going to show you very shortly is how you can then incorporate videos into Pixie as well. So everything that I've shown you so far in terms of mapping out the processes, adding the checklists, recording the videos, adding all that information, you can build all of that within the workflows in Pixie so that it all lives in one place. So instead of having to jump from a checklist on over here to a video over here to a spreadsheet over here, you can have it all where it needs to be, which is in the practice management application where you and your team are going to be getting work done. Just do me another quick favor. Let me know in the chat box, does anybody use Loom currently to document their workflows and processes, or any alternative to Loom? I've got someone here, Screen Share-O-Matic, Jing. Deepti says Zoom. Zoe says Loom, but not for these purposes. Max started recently. Abby says, yeah, we have loads on Loom. Awesome. Abby, just let me know, has it made a difference for you and the team having all of those training videos in Loom? Yeah, Max says also for client videos. Yeah, absolutely. You can use them for everything. I know that a number of firms use them. If you use Practice Ignition, you can embed the Loom video on a proposal, which is really, really neat. Inside Pixie, when you send a client task, which is a task that you assign to your client, you can embed a Loom video there. So as well as adding, you know, here's the checklist we need for you to complete your personal tax return, you could embed a Loom video with that, which just adds a bit more of a, you know, a bit more personality, a bit more of a personal touch, and help to explain what the checklist is and where they need to look for information. Abby, we work remotely, so yes, really handy to be able to see the process. Yeah, absolutely. Really, really useful for a virtual team. Even if you've got an in-house team, it's a worthwhile exercise doing the videos and documenting those. Great. So before we move into the actual building workflows in Pixie part, I just want to leave you with a few tips when it comes to building out your workflows. some of these sound a little bit like cliches, but tip number one is to keep them generic, but also keep them specific. So one of the questions that I often get asked is, do I have an all singing, all dancing bookkeeping workflow that has 100 steps that covers absolutely all bases? And the answer is no. And the reason the answer is no is because if I give you that workflow, it's not going to work for your firm, because the way that firms work is different. You know, the technology you use, the amount of different people involved in the workflow, the time frame that you might take to deliver that service, it's all completely different. So what you need to do is to keep your workflows generic, but also have them quite specific in parts. Another thing to remember is that you need to keep them detailed, but they don't want to be overlaid with too much detail. They need to be adaptable. They need to be flexible. They need to be things that can change slightly as and when needed. And then the final part is to keep them flexible, but also customizable. So kind of reiterating that, the second point there, having some flexibility in your workflows and having that customizable option is really, really important. You need to be able to change things and adapt them as you move along, because building workflows is not a one-off process. It's something that you start with and you'll just keep doing over time. And hopefully what you'll see by having your workflows in Pixie is that by housing them in that one central place, you can easily build them over time and update them, and then that will update them for all of your clients. So instead of having to update it in a system over here, you just update it here where you're actually using them and doing the work. I remember having a conversation with somebody towards the end of last year, and they made a really good point, which is that by having the workflows in a practice management app and building them out there and using them almost in a live setting, it becomes the operational manual for your business, and it's a live document. So I know that I think some of the membership organizations or membership bodies like the ICAW, for example, they recommend when you start out to create an operations manual or a manual of how you do things. And from conversations I've had, people have created these and then they just gather dust or cyber dust or live somewhere and never get looked at again. And really what you can do by building these processes out in a practice management application is that they are live documents, they're working documents, they're things that get improved and iterated and used on an almost daily basis. Great. So before we jump into Pixie, if you haven't already, please go and start a free trial. You'll find it incredibly useful to be able to click along and do this with us. Just because, if anything, you know, you can get a feel for how it works as we're going through. By all means, you don't have to keep the trial afterwards. Like I said, there's no credit card required. You can cancel anytime, but I just think it will help you to understand a little bit more during this process. Cool. So moving into Pixie, I'm going to start with a few basics. So I know there's a few customers on here, so if I'm telling you something you already know, please bear with me. In terms of getting to the templates inside Pixie, what you need to do is click on settings and then click on task templates. And you'll have a long list, well, hopefully not too long a list, but you have a list of all of the workflow templates that live in your workspace. I've got a list of 68 templates here, and all of these templates in my workspace are currently available on our workflow template library, which is right here. So if you're just starting out, you haven't got many workflow processes, you're looking for that jumping off point, that initial kind of starting point, please come and check out this workflow template library here. We've got a variety of templates for different services, different countries, and we're going to be really focusing on adding this out and building some really cool processes in here over the next couple of months. So go check this out. In terms of adding these templates into your Pixie workspace, I'm just going to start there very quickly because that's a question that I've had from a few people over the last few weeks. If I pick this workflow process from James Ashford as an example and just click on download, all you need to do is click on get template, download template here. That's going to download a file there. If you then come back to Pixie, it's probably going to ask me to log back in. Yep, thought so. Click on settings, task templates, import template, and then you just need to drag and drop this file onto here, and that's now been added. So if I scroll down, I should see James Ashford effortless sales system imported on today's date, 23rd of March 2021. So literally in seconds, you've taken a template from the template library, you brought it into Pixie. So if you're just getting started, please feel free to try that right now. Once you've got the workflows in Pixie, I'm just going to open up an example just to explain what they consist of and how they work. Where's a nice easy one? Monthly bookkeeping. It's always a nice start point. So this first screen here of the workflows is all to do with how and where the tasks get created and how often you want them to recur. So tasks being created is when you want Pixie to actually create the task. So for example, monthly bookkeeping, this is something we do on a monthly basis. Pixie isn't going to create 12 tasks on day one for each of the months of the year. It's going to create the tasks as and when that month falls due. So for example, on the first Monday of every month, Pixie is going to create this monthly bookkeeping job. It's going to recur every month afterwards, and the deadline is going to be 7 days later. Coming back to my points earlier about flexibility and being able to customize this is really, really easy to do in Pixie because you can customize when you want it to start. It could be on a specific date of the month. So you could say, I want it to start on the 1st of March, running on the 1st of the month afterwards. You can pick a specific weekday, or you can pick a specific month day. It's completely up to you. Same with the recurrence, as well as it being monthly, sorry. You could say do it bi-weekly. So we could say start it every Monday, recur every 2 weeks. So again, really flexible, really easy to change. And then the last part is the deadline. How long in advance do you want the deadline to be after the task has started? So here I've got it set to 7 days. It could be 10, it could be 30. Again, just enter the number in there that you want to work to. On the left-hand side, we have the default assignee for this task. So the way that workflows work in Pixie is that they can either be assigned to a specific person or to the client manager. So when you add clients into Pixie, each client will have a client manager that you allocate. If they're the person that does all of the tasks for that client, then you just choose client manager here. But if you have a specific person, for example, Joey, who does all the bookkeeping, I would just select Joey on this list, and that means that he gets all the bookkeeping jobs. Moving on to the next step, this is where you can start to visualize what the various steps in the workflow process are. So this is probably a little bit more detailed than the flowchart example, but I would say more in line with what we have on the spreadsheet here with the actual specific elements and specific steps. And everything that you can see here on the screen in terms of the workflow, again, is flexible and customizable. All of these options here, you just drag and drop to move them up and down. So you can move them around, you can reorder them. You can add more things at the bottom by clicking on Add Subtask. And you can remove things by just clicking on the step and removing it, and that takes it out. So reorganizing, building out the process, using a template and adapting it is really, really simple. Just come in here, drag and drop things around and have a play around with them. Now, in terms of the various elements of workflows, there's a few things that you can include. This first step here is an email template, and there are 2 types of email templates that you can build into your workflows in Pixie. The first is a manual email, and what that will do is it will create the task. It will create the email as a template. It will add in the information here, like the name of the client, the deadline, the secure upload link, etc. But it won't send the email on your behalf. So in order to send the email, you would need to open the task and click on send. And the possible use cases for having a manual email are where you need to update information on an individual basis for each email that goes out. So maybe there's very specific requirements per client. Or if you just want to have a little bit more control over what's going out to the clients. I know that a number of people aren't quite ready to make the step to being, 100% on autopilot, where emails are firing out, different times of the day or week, depending on the services. So having the manual email option there just gives you a little bit more control over that process. If you wanted to change it to automated, it's just a simple switch that makes it automated, which means in this case, Pixie will send the email automatically as soon as the job gets started to the client. So in terms of automated emails, what are the things that you can do with them? Well, one of the things I would recommend, first of all, is using the secure upload link. What that means is that you're automating information requests. So instead of having to go in and manually ask for information each month or for different types of jobs, you can automate it by setting up the automated email templates, having a link to the document portal here, which means that as soon as the job gets created, you've already made that request for information. What you might then choose to do, for example, is you might want to add an extra step in here to check if the client has responded. So again, I'm just showing you how flexible this can be to work with. We might choose to add a subtask in here. Let me just select a send there. Add a step in here. Has client responded? And I'm going to save that. So what you'll do is you'll check if the client has responded and uploaded the information. If they haven't, what you could then do is build a manual email template that you can literally come in and click send. So instead of having to then manually type out that email reminding them, you could just have that email template ready to go. Say, cool, second reminder, You would type out the message in here. I'm not going to write that out right now. And then that would move up and you would move that here. So when it comes to actually working through this workflow, you've got the choice. You don't need to send that email. If they've sent you the information here and when you log in to do the work, you check that it's there, great. I'll tick this step off here. I'll ignore this step here and I'll move on to step number 4, which is the process of bookkeeping. Now, in terms of building out the instructions for things, I mentioned earlier that checklists are good, videos are good. And what you can see here is that you can add all of that information into Pixie and into your workflow. So for this process bookkeeping step, what I've got is I've got a checklist. I've got the checklist items for me and the team to tick off here. I've got links. You could have links off to websites, apps, different resources. And then I've also got a training video embedded here as well. So I've taken all of those different things and condensed it into one place, which really makes Pixie that kind of knowledge base of how to do things. So instead of having a separate knowledge base where you figure out how things work or you detail what your processes look like, it all lives inside Pixie, inside the workflow. So within this step here, we've got this information. In terms of adding these in, if you're not entirely sure, I'm just going to give you an example at the bottom. For checklists, you just tick this box here. That will allow you to add checklist steps. And for videos, you just click on the video icon here. And then if I grab a link from here, copy link, go back to Pixie. And you can see straight away that we've added the video in on the task. So really, really simple to do. And again, really enhances the actual workflow itself by having this in there as an option. What you can also do, and something that I would recommend doing in your workflows, is adding information in there about when tasks get reassigned and what statuses you want to apply to different tasks. So for example, in Pixie, we don't have the ability to assign subtasks to individual people. And one of the reasons that we kind of went that route initially is just because the feedback that we had from people is that it's quite difficult and time consuming to go through and allocate out individual subtasks. So really we wanted it to be much simpler. So one of the things that I would recommend doing as part of your instructions in your processes is adding some instructions here about whether or not the task needs to get reallocated and whether or not a certain update needs to be applied to it based on what's happened. So for example, this step here, has client responded? You might choose to build this out and say, if no, please update task label to waiting on client. Maybe you'll add that as a checklist. Maybe you'll color code it so it's easy to see. And what that means is that when you're working through this task here and you get to this step and you say, have they responded? And the answer is no. You can then go up to the top of the task, apply the label waiting on client. And what that will allow you to do is that when you go into the work report in Pixie, which hopefully if I have time, I can show you, it will allow you to filter all of the tasks in your entire organization based on that label or based on another label. So what I would recommend doing is making the most of the labeling system in Pixie. If I just show you that quickly, go to settings, task labels, and build out what these labels look like. And then incorporate the labels into your actual workflow process as well. So say on this particular step, apply this label or remove this label, add it as a checklist box, and then nobody's going to miss it. And by having that process in there, you're almost forcing people to pay attention to it, which will hopefully make the visibility and the reporting of all the tasks and all the things going in your workspace much better. Cool. Another thing that I wanted to show you in the workflows in Pixie is internal deadlines and how you can use those, because often I think people get a bit confused about how to use them. I'll give you an example. In this monthly bookkeeping workflow, let's say, for example, I wanted to make sure that within 7 days of the task starting, I've got all of the information in from the client. What I would do is I would move this internal deadline step here. I would say 7 days after the task has started. All information received. And I would add that here. So what that means is that when I'm working on this task, instead of working on the overall deadline, which could be 10 days, could be 20 days, it's whatever you've chosen it to be, I'm actually working towards this first internal deadline, which is in 7 days' time. The primary focus is to make sure that we've done these first 3 things, which is let the client know we're starting the job, request the information, and get that information in from them. So Add as many internal deadlines in here as you need to break up the different stages and create those milestones that you can work to. And you might choose to add some more information in here. So you might choose to add another internal deadline, that says bookkeeping is finished. And maybe that's going to be 10 days after the task has started. And that's going to live there, for example. Again, it just creates that milestone for you and your team to work to. So just conscious of time, a few more things that I wanted to show you how to do in Pixie. The first is how you can incorporate client tasks into your workflow. So if you don't already know, client tasks is where you can allocate a task or a checklist to your clients, which you can then set up some automatic reminder emails to and send it off to them. So for example, sending them an onboarding checklist, sending them a tax return checklist, even sending them a checklist of things you might need on a monthly basis for bookkeeping. You can do that as well. So one of the things that I would recommend doing for that is when you build your template, I'm going to create this example, when to start it. I'm just going to say, start it each Monday, each first Monday of the month, recur every month, deadline is. And this would be the first step in the actual overall workflow. So for example, if this was onboarding, then this would be step number 1 in the onboarding process. It wouldn't be a separate workflow. I'm just creating one as an example. So step number 1 would be send a client task. And what you would then do is you would build out the client task in this instructions tab right here. So you might say, please send me the following. You have the checklist of things. Then you can add any more information in here as well. Never type when I do these things. And what that will allow you to do is when you create this task, if I just start it, I'll pick a client. In terms of actually sending the client task, all you need to do here is just grab all of this information. Oops. That was not the right thing to click. Copy client tasks. Come in here, paste your information in, customize it if you need to, because remember, not every client is the same. You might need to tweak this slightly on a client by client basis. So you might say, actually, for this client, steps number 5 and 6 are redundant. You might choose to add a video here as well. If you've just recorded a personal video for them, you can click on the video link there, paste that in there. Once that's done, you click save, you send to the client, you edit the email template, you set up your automatic reminder to say, remind them every 7 days. You click update, you click send, and off it goes. So that's one of the ways that I would recommend building those client tasks into your workflow processes. It's not, I accept that it's not the perfectly automated process where the workflow creates the client task, but I think it's a good alternative because it also gives you that flexibility where instead of sending out the exact same client task to each of your clients, you can come in there and just tweak it slightly depending on what you need on a per client basis. Great. So what time are we on? 10 to, cool. Does anyone have any questions so far based on what I've shown you? I've not been paying attention to the Q&A box, which is here. Okay, Eleanor, is there an easy flowchart software or is the best done manually? Yeah, so Whimsical is the one that I would recommend based on what we looked at earlier. How does the date work, which links to the date in the client's field, e.g. their payroll date? Yeah, great question. So obviously workflows can get triggered based on dates on the client's record. So first of all, you need to make sure that they have that date set up. If you go to client fields, you can add a number of different dates and bits of information here. For example, we've got confirmation statement dates, which sync automatically from Company's House. You might have some other dates here like payroll dates as well. So when you come to the task templates and you create a new template, when you click on the start task option, you can select on the client date field. And what that will allow you to do is select the date from the list that you've created. So for example, payroll date, and then say whether you want it to start on the actual day, so many days before, so many days afterwards. So for example, let's say it was a year-end job. Maybe you want to start all your year-end work 30 days after the client's year-end is finished. So what you would do is you would select year-end and you would say start it 30 days afterwards. Or maybe you want to be super organized and try and get things started and balls rolling quicker, you could say, actually, for the year-end stuff, I'm going to start it 30 days before and get ahead of things. So you can be quite flexible in terms of when you want the tasks to start based on those specific dates that are relevant to those clients. So hopefully that answers your question, Eleanor. If you use an internal deadline, will that appear anywhere on the work list? Yes. So if I go to my task list, hopefully I've got one with an internal deadline. Yeah, I do. You can see here, I've got 2 tasks. Both of them have hard deadlines for the 31st of March, but I've got the next internal deadline that I need to hit is the 17th and 19th of March. They're both overdue. So from your team members' perspective, their to-do list is filtering by the internal deadline date, not the hard deadline date. So instead of them worrying about the kind of overall deadline that is on the 31st of March, it's just telling them to hit this next internal deadline, which is here. Shafiq, can you put a link to upload as part of a client task? Yeah, so the client task, when you send the actual client task itself, the overall thing is an upload process. So let me open this up here, client tasks. What your client will see is kind of similar to this. They'll see this task screen here at the bottom. They'll see the conversation tab here on the right-hand side, and they'll be able to attach files securely by clicking on attach new file here at the bottom. They should also have a button at the top that says attach files, so they can upload their documents to the checklist and the tasks that you send them, and those will get saved directly to the client's record as well. So all of that information gets saved into the same place. Kate, I understand you can't assign multiple people to a task, but can more than one person update a workflow? Yeah, more than one person can update a workflow. They just have to find the task to go in there and update things. So for example, if I click on team and I go to Joey's to-do list, and these are all Joey's tasks, they're not mine, they're not on my task list, and I open up one of these, which are all terribly overdue, I can start to tick things off on his task list. So yeah, you or somebody in the team can go in there and update things. Great. Will we get a recording of this to work through properly later? Yes, you will get a copy of the recording. Don't worry about that. Cool. So I'm just conscious of time. Deepti, could the tasks be reassigned? Yeah, you can reassign tasks really easily. So again, if I go to the team tab and I want to take something off Joey's plate and put it onto Kim's plate, then I click on Joey, I find the task, I click reassign, I select Kim, and I move it across to her. So that's now been reassigned. Kim would then receive a notification say, you've had this task reassigned to you for you to start working on. You can also reassign things off your own to-do list. You just find the task here, you click on reassign, select Kim, and that moves it off onto her to-do list. And then for me to keep track of the tasks that I've reassigned, I just click on this reassign tab here at the top, and it's giving me a list of all the tasks that I've reassigned that are currently still open. So these are all the open tasks that haven't been completed yet. So it's really easy for me to be able to follow up and keep track of what I've actually delegated out to team members. The last thing that I wanted to share with you very quickly whilst we have time in terms of the workflows specifically is that you can also trigger things based on Zapier. So we do have a Zapier integration, which means 2 things really. You can make things happen based on actions that take place in Pixie. So if I come into Zapier, I've got a number of events here. For example, if a job gets assigned, if a job gets completed, if a job gets started, if we create or update a client, or we create or update a contact, if any of those things happen in your Pixie workspace, you can use those as triggers to automate things in your workflow that might take place in different applications. So, it could be when a job gets finished, automate an email that comes out from MailChimp with a link to complete a feedback survey. You could build that email in Pixie yourself. You wouldn't have to use MailChimp. I'm just using it as an example. And then the same works for triggering workflows in Pixie based on things that happen in other applications. So, for example, if you use Go Proposal or Prets Ignition, the trigger there would be that the proposal gets accepted, and then the action would be that the workflow gets assigned to the client and gets started. So the two can work together And what you can use Zapier for is to build that workflow out beyond Pixie into some of the different applications that you use. And the place that you might want to visualize that is using something like this flowchart thing here, where I've got these different applications. For example, onboarding. I might say this is GP or PI, and that moves through into Pixie here. So you can start to add what the different apps are and then use the integrations to pass that information across and make it all streamlined. I'm just conscious of time. If you do have any more questions, let me know. Is there a Loom in the library I can follow to set client tasks and follow-up reminders like you were showing us? I missed it too quick. Yeah, we definitely do have a Loom video for that, Paul. Let me make a quick note to send you Loom client task. I think there might be one on our blog as well. If you go to our blog and look for the article about client tasks, there should be a video on there. Kate, can reassigning be automated or is it manual? Reassigning can't be automated. The actual assigning of the task in the first place can be automated. So when the task gets created, assign it to this person or this person or this person. But the reassigning of tasks can't. So one of the things, again, that I would recommend, similar to the task label thing that I showed you earlier, would be to build that as a step within the actual workflow itself. So for example, in this monthly bookkeeping one that I've been playing around with, what you might choose to do is add a step in here that says, reassign task to manager. And you might then choose to put that here. So that happens before the management account step happens. So that's just one way around it to build that in as part of the process. So I think as much the more information you can put into these in terms of who needs to be working on them, what the status updates needs to be, the better, because you're kind of building that foolproof process. Eleanor, for the task label, how does the system remove an old label and replace it with a new one? Yeah, so the way that the task labels work is on the actual task itself. So if I'm working through a workflow, for example, this confirmation statement one, just as a quick example, you can see here at the top that I have all my labels. And it's just a case of, if I have a step here that says apply this label, I come in here and I apply this label. If I then want to remove the label, I come in here and remove the label. The only ones that are automated by Pixie are the overdue labels. They're the ones that will apply automatically. All the rest, you and the team can apply as you're working through. And the benefit of using those that I mentioned earlier is in the reporting, because if you then go to team and work report, one of the filters that you can use in your work report, along with the type of job it is, the due by date, you might say, show me all the jobs that are due before the end of the month, where the label is waiting for client. Perfect, got none. So I know straight away we're not waiting to chase the clients for anything this month. And yeah, all the work that we've got is, the ball's in our court is for us to complete. So that's just one example of how you can use the labeling as part of your reporting inside Pixie. Great, all right. Well, I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to slide back to my slides. Like I said, if you do have any questions, feel free to send me an email. I will send a copy of this recording out afterwards for you to watch back. If you're looking for some workflow templates to get started with, please check out the workflow template library. Like I showed you earlier, they're really, really simple to add them into your workspace and then start to customize and to use. We've already done Q&A, so I'm well ahead of schedule, which is good to know. I do have 1 minute left, so if you do have any more questions, please let me know very quickly and I'll try to answer those for you. But otherwise, I don't want to keep you from your next meeting or call or whatever you've got booked in next. Eleanor, do you have Zap set up which I can use for Go Proposal and Pixie onboarding, setting the jobs off? Yeah, we have I'll send you a video, Eleanor, explaining how the Zap for Go Proposal and Pixie works and how it triggers the onboarding sequence. Great. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for your time this morning. Really, really appreciate you tuning in. Eleanor, I know you're tuning in from Australia as well. So big thank you for making the time. If you haven't already, please feel free to start a trial. You can have a play around in Pixie. I think the more that you go in there and poke around and play around and start to use it for different things, the more it will start to make sense, and the different questions you'll be able to think of and come back and ask us. Look forward to speaking with you all soon. Otherwise, have a great day. And yeah, catch up with you soon. Thanks.